I don't even know why people try their hardest to defend a corporate entity that is focused on the sole selfish goal of making money. People don't realize that Disney as a company do not share their values of inclusivity and tolerance. They're only going along with that shit to make money. And it's so obvious, but people are incredibly stupid and don't realize it. I've gotten some dolts that prioritize defending Disney, whatever the cost. No matter what scummy, greedy, or evil thing they do, they will either defend it with all their hearts, or they will not talk about it ever, and pretend it doesn't exist. I have to wonder whether it's something like brand loyalty or something. Disney makes the new content for X franchise, and I sometimes wonder if Disney never bought Star Wars, but they still owned Marvel, or still did their shitty live-action remakes, whether we'd still have people from the Star Wars fanbase specifically defending them, or whether it would be separate. I wonder that a lot. That people just defend Disney Star Wars just because it has the same brand name, and people have convinced themselves that the switch of leadership doesn't matter. Anyways, what I wanted to talk about is a video by Turf Nation published around 2 months ago about the whole Star Wars Outlaws reveal. You may remember I made my own video in complete contrast about Star Wars Outlaws. Turf Nation, being the woke-ass shill that he is, talked about that shit about people judging the gender of the main character Kay Vess based on the reveal trailer alone. On that, I have to say that people might be disappointed on the gender of the main character because they originally believed that they would be able to make a customizable player character based on that phony article that teased that the open world Star Wars game would be like No Man's Sky and Starfield, and it would be more ambitious than it actually ended up being. Turf Nation doesn't mention this when I think it's a fair point. People might be just bummed out because those fake leaks ended up being untrue, and they don't like the idea of playing as a rigid set-in-stone character. I don't know. He shows a clip from Geeks and Gamers that's less than 10 seconds long, where Jeremy or whoever says he's turned off because of the race and gender of the character. Turf Nation provides no context, and given Turf Nation is the kind of guy who takes people out of context and doesn't show or explain everything about a video he's responding to, I have to wonder if Jeremy said more of substance that Turf here is just leaving out. I don't watch Geeks and Gamers, but something tells me that he probably said something before or after that probably gives me better reasoning. Turf Nation then tries using Cal Kestis to his advantage by saying, "Hey, what about the last game where we got a ginger white man as the lead?" to call Jeremy pathetic, but not once addresses the double standard of so many woke-ass peanuts doing the same thing when Cal Kestis was first introduced. If you don't remember that whole fiasco, so many SJWs ripped on Cal Kestis for being a, quote, boring white male protagonist. And I don't remember Turf Nation making a video calling out the other side of the fence for being racist and sexist hypocrites. You see, that's the thing. People like Turf Nation like to pretend that they are the inclusive and accepting ones, but never actually call out legitimate bigotry when it counts, or at least when it's liberals doing it. This conception that racism can't happen to white people is flat out wrong. Racism can happen to anybody. If you're a black guy and you have this perception that white people are privileged by default, and you just assume that every straight white male have no issues, then that's just a racist stereotype. There's different kinds of white people as well, you know. There's Scandinavians who might have pale, bright skin, and then you might have Italians who may have darker skin but still classify as white. I wouldn't be bitching about this right now, but Turf Nation pretty much only talks about this shit when it happens to someone with the perceived victim mentality that wokeness tries to propagate. I'd like to say firsthand that the Moses Ingram situation was seen as completely insincere for a reason. Disney should have just fucking ignored random Instagram messages sent to one of the actresses, especially when they ignored public tweets by SJWs ripping on Cameron Monaghan for being the straight white male ginger Jedi. Yeah, that's the thing. This racism crap was utterly hypocritical. Thus, it was seen as insincere. Then we get Turf talking about a tweet by some random motherfucker talking about whether Star Wars has any men left in the universe. And then he plays this video showcasing Star Wars characters who are male. Half of them are not characters made by Disney like Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Count Dooku, and so on. So do those really count? I also thought it was a fucking joke when in this compilation video, he showed Quinlan Vos, who in the context of Disney canon, he's barely been in. I mean, looking at his appearances, it's pathetic. Since the times he's been mentioned don't count, he's been in Dark Disciple and Brotherhood, some random comic, and a mobile game. Maybe we could staple on that one Clone Wars episode he was in, plus the Phantom Menace if we wanted to be generous, but then that's like what? 6 appearances? What a joke. And again, over half the characters in this compilation video, Disney did not make, and a couple of which they've butchered, and a lot of which I think they underuse. Anyways, this video is just a fucking joke. You probably clicked on this video for someone defending the indefensible. I just wanted to get Turf's video out of the way. So with that being said, I left a comment pointing out 2 things. 1, Disney filmed near a Chinese concentration camp, which automatically invalidates their already insincere wokeness and feigned representation. And 2, the shit I've been saying about Cal Kestis, whom Turf Nation tried to use to his advantage. I was told by my community back when this video was new that they couldn't find my comment. So that strongly implies that either Turf Nation or one of his moderators blocked it. And upon learning that, I was furious. He's not even gonna try and address the elephant in the room. But don't worry, one of his fans absolutely did, and their response was absolutely horrible. I scoffed very loudly after I was done reading it. The response says, and I quote,
"Disney isn't only an American or Western company, they're global. If you're going to work somewhere like China, you respect their culture and show diplomacy." Those countries don't want to be indoctrinated with Western agenda that people here don't seem to get. And boring white male protagonist isn't what I'd qualify as racist nor sexist. Pales in comparison to the hate Moses Ingram received.
The first defense for the first thing I pointed out really puts the dismissive ignorance of Disney defenders into perspective. Did this guy just try to pass off a human rights violation as, well, Disney's gotta respect Chinese culture? Because that is just flat out retarded. Not to mention, he doesn't even directly reference the Chinese concentration camps directly. He just turns it into some crap about respecting Chinese culture. Chinese culture has nothing to do with it. Unless you also want to say that the Holocaust was merely an extension of German culture. I mean, after all, the Nazis were very pro-German culture. Jesus, these shills have absolutely no idea how the world works. The Chinese concentration camps are an act of the government and have nothing to do with Chinese culture. There's a difference. What they do at these camps is horrific. Doing the barest fuck of research reveals that the Chinese government do terrible things to people at these camps. And the people at these camps are ethnic Turkish Muslims, Christians, etc. Yeah, that's right. What happens at these camps are a disrespect to many cultures, to the most extreme degree, where the word disrespect is an understatement. How this relates to Disney is that they gave this scummy, oppressive government special thanks in the credits of the Mulan remake. Plus the fact that they filmed near the camps. They did this purely to make money off the Chinese audience, and thank God it backfired in their faces. Because what they were doing was practically validating human rights violators. This isn't some massacre Chinese warlords did in medieval times. This is an ongoing problem that has been happening for years upon years at this point. Realistically, people can't do anything. But the least they can do is not support inhumane stuff like this. The Mulan remake is unethically made art, if you could even call it art, made by an evil, uncaring company that wanted to maximize Chinese box office money. That's why they filmed near these camps. They didn't need to film anywhere near China, but they did it anyways because they were so greedy that they prioritized money over what was right. That's the thing. In the West, they'll go woke and play along with the SJWs for profit, And in the East, they'll then pander to the Chinese government, who has the absolute opposite mentality, and try to appease them too, even if it means supporting an evil regime. If they actually cared about gay rights or racial equality, they would forgo the Chinese dollars entirely and tell every corrupt government to fuck themselves. But China's where the big bucks are made, so they've got to feign support to people of different backgrounds, cultures, sexualities, whatever in the West, but it means squat. I yearn for the day a Disney shill is actually dumb enough to try and defend Chinese concentration camps. Skirting around the issue like this commenter does is plain cluelessness. Now listen, if you gotta sell a movie to China to break even, whatever. But do not ever pretend that you have values and try to grandstand other people who call you out on it. A lot of the messages in Star Wars nowadays are completely insincere, and you can tell they're insincere even without knowing who's making these shitty movies. But it puts the whole thing into context when you point out that Disney are good chums with genocidal tyrants. This is what the Disney defenders don't acknowledge. Like whatever garbage Disney puts out, but do not ever pretend that Disney are exclusive or sincere with anything they do that isn't making money. And on the topic of Star Wars Outlaws, wasn't Ubisoft the company that, second only to Activision Blizzard, became infamous for gender harassment at their company? Like, I haven't looked super into it because the Activision Blizzard horror stories were more eye-catching, but from what I understand, sexual harassment was an issue at many of the studios. So the claim at the start of every Assassin's Creed title about the people who make the games is not entirely true. And Ubisoft were kind of lazy with what they were doing to fix it, giving out useless PR statements. Point is, Disney willingly licensed a Star Wars game to be made by a Ubisoft studio. Why in the hell would they do that? I can't even give them the benefit of the doubt, because before then, they gave the exclusive rights to Star Wars games to Electronic Arts, who won the worst company in America title 2 years in a row, right before they got the exclusive rights to make Star Wars games. And that's another thing. I dare a Disney shill to defend the predatory loot boxes that Battlefront 2 2017 released with. Something like this was gonna happen when you give EA rights to anything. Like, Battlefront 2's launch date is like the one thing Disney, and by extension EA shills, don't even try to defend. Because that's one of the few things that would result in near universal backlash by everyone and their dog. People just pretend Disney as a company cares about inclusivity, when they absolutely do not. This is some shit Turf Nation should absolutely address. But if he did address it, he's either going to have to defend a human rights violation or fully admit that everything he believes in is wrong. Very wrong. So it's easier not to talk about it. That's the thing. Like whatever Disney Star Wars shit you want, but also acknowledge that Disney at the end of the day has done greedy and evil things, and nothing they promote is truly sincere. It's all an act. Anyways, I think it's important to talk about this, because I think those like Turf Nation need to get a clue and be more honest than they currently are.